Hello, this is Real World Audio, and now I'm going to show you how is my mono setup, what is the recipe I'm using to listen to mono records, and also share with you about why is it a good idea to listen to mono. So here we go. So there's one option that most hardcore mono lovers use, and this is something that Sakuma-san used, Susumu Sakuma, in Japan. Unfortunately, he passed away. So what he did is he put a loudspeaker in the corner, the mono loudspeaker, and then that basically horn loaded the room. So he was using high efficiency horn loudspeakers, and plus if you place them in the corner, that just adds additional efficiency to them, and that's one way to get just astonishing level of efficiency and dynamics out of a mono system. And then of course you need only a single amplifier and your source, your turntable with a mono cartridge, only putting out one channel. So this way you can absolutely enjoy mono, and this way you will get a sound in your room that is similar to being at the venue, and you hear a sound all over you. And I mean being at the venue when you are, for example, at a jazz club, and the sound is just there in the room, and you are walking around, can talk to your friends, go wherever you want. You don't sit down to a single listening spot. You can just pick your choice, and the sound just fills the room. And it's not like it will project you a singer here and the piano here, and then there's a guy with a double bass here. You won't hear it like that. It's like it's in the room, and you will hear the reflections of the instruments, of the sounds from your voice. It's just like the music is in the air. It's a really special feel to it, and it's truly fantastic. However, there's only one thing about it, is that you need a room dedicated to it. So in that case it means you need a mono room. Let me just spell it out. So in that case, if you want to put a stereo system next to this mono system, then you will need to place, let's say, here like those two loudspeakers firing this way, and then place like a couch here and your stereo system in here or somewhere, and then your room will be totally cluttered with two systems, and then your stereo speakers in the way of mono. Or maybe you can set up the stereo system at the other end of the room, and put your couch here, but then you will need to remove the couch. And I would say that's not a good idea to have both mono and stereo in your room, because for stereo you want to sit in a position, in your center position, and there it makes the best 3D soundstage for you. But for a mono, you can do whatever you want. You can have a dance floor for yourself, and you will have fantastic music regardless of position. Plus, with mono, you have the you place it here in the corner, and that takes care of things. While for stereo, you need to set them up longitudinally, so the two speakers face this way. And if you set it up in the other way, that for example you need to set it up so they are alongside the long wall and fire to you, and you are sitting here, and maybe here you have a dining table or something like that, this is a severely hyper compromised solution. And even though I gave you recipes how to make this work, but making such a layout work is only will give you like 10 to 15% of the results that you can have compared to setting them up, your speakers along the shorter wall and firing towards the long wall. This way, if you have speakers along shorter wall firing the long way, you can have loudspeakers that cost 10 times less, and you have stereo imaging better compared to getting loudspeakers that are of vastly higher technology, vastly higher expense, and trying to fire this way. It will give you a worse imaging, worse soundstage compared to a much lower grade speakers firing this way, provided that you have taken a lot of extra steps, precautions to make the room work, like the ones I suggested to you guys. So this is one way that you can put your mono system in the corner and feed your room, but then that leaves no real space for stereo in your room. So it means you need 2 dedicated rooms if you want to listen both mono and stereo. So now, if you have only 1 dedicated room for both mono and stereo, then your only choice is basically this. So the better way is to set it up longitudinally, so your 2 speakers are here and you are sitting somewhere here to listen. But now this is not a very good camera angle for me, so I'm going to draw this way so you can see more of the things happening. So basically we have 2 speakers facing you here, sitting on in the middle of your sofa, and basically they emit sound waves, right, that are coming from each of the loudspeakers, and they will intersect by your ears. And what's happening here is that the sound is coming from one and the other, they will add up together and strengthen each other. Of course, they can also cancel each other, phase cancellation at certain frequencies, but that's also a good thing, because by playing around with the distance between these 2 speakers, you can work around with the phase cancellations in the mid-bass area. And you have to do that because your room, based on its size, its actual dimensions, it will add so-called room nodes to the sound, and it will overemphasize certain frequencies and take away from certain frequencies. So with your loudspeaker positioning, you can compensate for what the room is doing for you. Now, if you are listening to that 1 channel mono solution only, then there is no way for you to correct for the room errors. So if you are listening to hardcore pure 1 channel only mono, then you are unable to fix the room's problems in the bass. So you will get a much more uneven, much more rougher response, and your room will make a much bigger difference compared to setting up 2 loudspeakers, even though you are using them for mono. So exact same thing coming from here as from there, but playing around with the difference between the 2, the phase cancellations and additions, you can make it work in such a way that you can use the positioning to take advantage of it, so your room becomes less of an issue, so you can compensate for your room, and you don't necessarily have to DSP everything out. First, just try positioning your speakers, and then if it really sucks and there's no way to figure it out, then go for DSP. But if you have a decent sounding room and you play around with loudspeaker positioning, then you do not need any sort of additional EQ to fine-tune the experience. That has been my 2 decades of experience in loudspeaker positioning and rooms. So basically what's happening here is that that's one advantage why you want 2 channel mono listening instead of 1. So one advantage is that you can take care of room problems much better compared to a single loudspeaker. The other thing is that the two loudspeakers, the output of them adds up. So basically, if you double up your loudspeakers, you have almost 1 octave lower frequency response. So by using two loudspeakers instead of one for mono, you are gaining 1 extra octave, plus 1 octave bass response. And that's huge. And the third thing is that instead of sitting on axis, like here, like you would be in your room and you would be maybe sitting here or walking around there, when you are on axis of the loudspeaker, it sounds quite a bit different from being off axis of the loudspeaker. And for most people, they would not set it up this way anyway if they have a true mono system. Most people think the best way to set it up, maybe let's just get a fresh page, is like set up the speaker here in your room. This is your room, and then you are sitting here. Now this is the worst idea possible, because you are on axis, and you will, when you are on axis to a loudspeaker, then you will hear the sound coming from the speaker. If you are off axis, sitting somewhere or standing somewhere else other than the axis, then the sound is much more coming from your room and not coming from a box. So if you are sitting in front of the box, then you will going to hear the sound coming out of the box. And the only place when you don't hear it, the only solution when you don't hear it coming out of the box is when you put it in the corner and corner load it. Now, if you are in this scenario, like we are using two loudspeakers for mono, because the sound waves intersect from the two speakers, you will hear what your perception, what your brain will think of it, is that the sound is happening somewhere between the two speakers. So this is what you will hear from mono, from left and right channel, is that the action is there, right there in the very center. I'll draw it a little bit off. Anyway, so it's between the two loudspeakers. Now, if you have a system, and many people don't like mono this way and this mono, because what they have when they listen to it is they have a pinpoint. So you have left speaker, right speaker, and you have a pinpoint happening here, and everything is compressed into a dot. Now, if you hear mono like that on your system, it means that even your stereo reproduction has problems. Because if it compresses everything into a dot, that's a telltale sign that you have a system, a stereo chain, an audio chain that does a lot of processing to the sound, so that it squeezes everything into a dot, and that's not natural. The natural way is that when you have the two loudspeakers and the image is basically enveloping, this is the soundstage. So a good mono soundstage is this big. So basically, if for this record, Emanuel Feuermann playing cello, when I listen to it on my system with these big guys, then I hear Emanuel Feuermann right here in front of me playing a life-size cello, and the piano is behind him, accompanying him, and it's just absolutely beautiful, like there is a cello in my house playing, and it's not a dot emanating cello sounds and piano sounds compressed together. No, they are in your room and doing their job. So when you can use mono records this way as a test of your system. So does it do a processing to your sound? Does it compress everything to a dot? if it does compress everything to a dot, then it will translate to stereo recordings getting additional sharpening. And a lot of people love that, and for me that's kind of like a peculiar thing, and sometimes I like to listen to systems that do that, because that will give you an extra feeling of sharpening and extra aggressivity, extra edge, and extra visual information. But that's not how real life instruments sound. They are not coming from a pinpoint. A real life cello, when you listen to it, or a real life singing, is not a pinpoint event. So it's not coming from a tiny localized place. It's like her whole chest cavity is resonating and the voice is projecting. So if you get a vocal where you just hear the saliva and you hear the sound coming from a tiny dot, then that stereo is doing something to the imaging. It's skewing, it's distorting it. People love to use the word distortion to explain phenomena, and that is one phenomena. When everything is so condensed, that's a form of distortion, because that's not how it is when a real life person sings or talks or plays a real music instrument. So that's my take on using two channels for mono. And of course the big advantage of that is that you can hijack your stereo system to reproduce that sound, and you can use your stereo amplifier or a pair of mono blocks to feed each channel separately. And now the only trick is to use a mono cartridge like the Audio-Technica 8033 mono that I have, which actually has two mono coils. And that's different from a stereo cartridge, because in a stereo cartridge you have the coils in a V shape. So you get the 90-degree angle difference between them, so they can read both lateral and both up and down movements for the cartridge. And in a mono, the cartridges, they read only the lateral movement, they don't read the up and down movement. So you have two coils that read only just the sideways motion, and one coil is feeding the right channel and the other coil is feeding the left channel of your phono stage. And now you are getting a mono image with the two. And in my case, in my room, my stereo system is like set up like this in the longitudinal direction, so it's facing the wrong direction acoustically. So it means that I'm forced to have the not so nice situation where it's acoustically very much compromised. However, for mono, this is not necessarily a bad thing, because in my case, this is kind of how my system is. So it's kind of, my sofa is here, my speakers are here, and the room extends much more on this side. And what happens is, because of the unequal placement of the loudspeakers, this speaker, my right channel, gets a lot more bass reinforcements because it's kind of closer to the corner, and this guy is virtually in the halfway of the room, so this doesn't get any bass reinforcement. So there is a little bit of unequal response between the two channels. And when I'm listening to mono this way, then it means that my mono is not reproduced with pinpoint accuracy. So there's a little bit of a balance shift for the frequencies, and that helps to recreate a 3D image of a mono record that is lifelike. So that's why when I play records, if I don't read the label that it's a mono label, I cannot tell that I'm listening to a mono recording. And I have lots of mono recordings which have much better imaging, much better sound staging than many stereo records, which means that with this guy, I feel that he is in my room playing. And when I put on a bunch of stereo records or modern recordings, it doesn't feel like they are in the room. It sounds like a processed artificial recording generated by a machine. So thank you guys for tuning in. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.